Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our Cloud2Edge Complete webinar, which is hosted by Edgewater Networks, 888 VoIP, and CloudCo partner. Today, we have Jim O'Loughlin, the Director of Sales from Edgewater Networks, who is going to go through with you essentially what Cloud2Edge is, the benefits of it, and then we will also have Josh Westfall, our Technical Sales Manager from 888 VoIP, who's going to talk about some in-depth additional technical benefits. And then we have a nice incentive that we'll be discussing at the end for you. So please, any questions that you have, feel free to type in the chat and we will answer those at the end of the webinar during our Q&A session. Now we can start with Jim.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Danielle, for that introduction. And I'd just like to say on behalf of Edgewater Networks that we appreciate CLOUDCO and 888 VoIP bringing us on this webinar, and we're very excited. We've had a solid partnership with them for the past couple of years, but this is a kind of an exciting new step we're taking with them. So we as a company are very excited about where we're going. So let's start out with just a quick overview of who we are as a company. Edgewater Networks was founded in 2001. And we were founded to focus on solving the problems of quality and service for voice over the internet or voice over IP services. So that's our core history, and that's basically all we focus on and have been focusing on. And it's been an interesting time for us as a company. The past 2 years, our company is doubled, and we're on scale to do that again. You know, most of the attendees probably know high growth market, and there's a lot of new things going on in the market, but the key thing is it's the right time for the market. The customers are ready for it, and a lot of new functionality that they're getting involved in. We as a company are #1 in the United States in market share for what we call enterprise session border controllers. And with that, we have over 1 million under management today. And what we call an edge is basically a device at an end user customer site. So we've got a lot of experience, and we've stars in early days that have made us a much stronger company today to solve the problems. And because of that, we've acquired partnerships with companies like AT&T and Comcast from the service provider side, from an enterprise side, McDonald's, and from a partnership perspective, we work with companies like Polycom, Broadsoft. And as I mentioned, some of the partnerships we have, the reason why we believe partnerships are important is because, as you'll see in the space we fit in the network, we are required by default to interoperate with devices on customer sites, as in YEALINK telephones. We need to interoperate with devices within the network, like a Broadsoft call control or Empiric network management. So we're very focused on interoperability. In the sense, being an ecosystem team player is a very important part of our DNA. But the main focus is the problems that we solve today, the problems we target to solve today. So depending on your experience in the industry as an attendee, you may remember back in the days when telephone was as simple as plugging one line into one wire and plugging that into a phone. When you got the phone, you had a direct, dedicated connection between two telephone handsets. Obviously, now with voice over the internet, it's completely different architecture. It's a shared network architecture, and it offers a tremendous new level of features, functionality, and opportunity. Yes.
Your audio's cutting out really bad. A couple people are mentioning
Jim, we can't really hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can solve that. I'm going to try to switch my microphone. How's my audio now?
Sounds good so far.
Sounds much better.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me know. Again, I apologize. You know, it's actually, that wasn't a test, but that's an example of the first point, lack of customer site visibility. When you deploy voice over IP services in a traditional environment, you don't really have visibility to the end user. And as you all know, voice over IP is a two-way delivery protocol. So one user may be able to hear very clearly, while the other user may not be able to hear the audio coming back. And one of the challenges created with voice over IP was the fact that the typical environment didn't give visibility to the LAN side. So we took it from the last mile, which was from the telephone pole to the building, and now we really have to worry about the last 100 feet, which is taking it from the building to that IP phone. And to solve that problem, traditionally, you roll a truck. You send a technician out there, you do a packet capture, you analyze what's going on at the customer site, you look at their LAN, and you determine what that problem is. And you know, although that's a very effective way to solve a problem, it's also a very expensive way to solve the problem, because a technician truck roll can be $300 to $500. Another challenge is, you know, again, we've gone from a somewhat consistent TDM background, where things were, again, analog was fairly consistent, PRI was fairly consistent, to a SIP protocol, which, although a standard, it does get interpreted different ways by different providers. So configurations and inconsistent interoperability become an issue. And then ultimately, when you're trying to provide a solution in the world of voice over IP, support can be expensive due to the lack of visibility, due to the interoperability issues, due to the need to roll a truck out to solve what that problem is, or to determine the problem, to diagnose and then resolve. Those things, if you're a service provider, can become, they can eat up your margins for that year. If you're an integrator or a reseller, it can damage your ability to support the customer, and then ultimately damage your relationship with that customer. Which obviously, if you're in that space, your whole value add is delivering high quality solutions. And then finally, network security. It's something that we hear a tremendous amount about between fraud and hacking across all data networks. SIP is not immune to that. And that's another thing that gets introduced when you introduce voice over IP. So that's something that we also address. So let's get into exactly how Edgewater Networks and CLOUDCO solve that problem. With we call our solution basically network edge orchestration. And there's two components. The main component, which is the EdgeView Service Control Center, which is software that manages the network, manages and monitors the devices at the edge. And those devices at the edge we call the EdgeMarc Intelligent Edge devices. And these devices sit at each of the end user customer sites at the edge of their network, interfacing with the service provider's network, and then interfacing with the LAN side, both data and voice. And we'll cover EdgeView first. The EdgeView Service Control Center is a very powerful tool, starting with provisioning and managing these devices. So with EdgeView, you have the ability to set up profiles and templates to basically deploy a common profile across each of your customer sites. And that becomes important in the fact that within voice over IP, there's dozens and dozens of parameters that you can set. But the fact is, those parameters may not change for any of your sites within your network. They may change from service provider to service provider or integrator to integrator, but they are typically static within a specific network. So EdgeView allows you and enables you to deploy the devices under a common template infrastructure, so that you don't have to worry about setting multiple parameters when you deploy. And you could theoretically make, say, 99% of the parameters static, while you leave 3 to 4 per site, and those might be local IP addresses or other specific parameters. And that greatly speeds up the provisioning process when the technician on site or the customer, if they're working on the implementation with you, has very little to do when it comes to actually deploying the box other than plugging it in. The next key thing is that EdgeView will monitor all edge marks in the network real time. And this is very key. We run statistics every 10 seconds on every call that goes through an edge mark. And we have visibility to LAN side and WAN side performance. So if you look into an EdgeView running in an operational network, you will see for a specific phone call a MOS score, which for those of you who don't know is a quality rating on the LAN side of a call and the WAN side of a call. That quickly helps you troubleshoot, is my problem in access or is my problem at the customer local area network, which becomes key. Again, what we endeavor to do is to analyze and alert to all problems proactively, and then when at all possible, resolve those problems with a technician at the NOC, minimizing or eliminating any need to roll a truck to a customer site. And basically, when we see something like a MOS score dropping below which we call a threshold level, it will automatically go into automated packet capture and troubleshooting mode for the technician, so that they don't have to go back and backtrack into the data to see what happened. That data will be proactively delivered to them. And then from a troubleshooting and remediation perspective, that will allow that technician to access not only the EdgeMarc on the site, but because the EdgeMarc is a secure device, a proxy, if you will, on the customer site, it will also allow that engineer to access the devices on site, say the LAN equipment and the IP phones, for example, YEALINK phone on site. So it allows the engineer to look at a configuration on a device, potentially reprogram a phone, to look at settings on an Ethernet switch to make sure that they're performing the way they're supposed to. All of this gets, this access is done through proxy access through EdgeView, which is sitting in this case, the EdgeView is sitting with CLOUDCO. So you get all this power without having to host and run servers at your own site. The power comes to you through CLOUDCO by running a partitioned and secure EdgeView. And then finally, as we're looking at all these analytics over the course of days and weeks and months, you want to look to see if there's any kind of repetitive troubles, chronic issues, any kind of trends that you need to be aware of that may not be evident from one trouble call. So the analytics and reporting capabilities will allow you to store a number of days, let's say 10 days worth of data, to look at across multiple problems and multiple issues if you in fact have them. Where this becomes very powerful is, for example, if you have a customer who alerts you to a problem that they had on Tuesday, but it's now Friday because they were busy doing their day-to-day, you can look back at the history on their Tuesday calls and see the data and the statistics as to what was going on. And there's in excess of 100 parameters that we track on every call. So an engineer can look at that call 3 days after the fact and determine the trouble, which is very powerful when you consider in most telephony networks today, the typical response is, well, we're going to monitor your network and determine over the next couple of days if we see it again what the issue was. So this allows you to, in a sense, have a time machine to go back to when the problem happened, in addition to tracking future data. So the power of that comes through the EdgeMarc Intelligent Edge, which, as I mentioned, sits at the customer site. It's the main interface between the broadband connection and the customer's LAN and voice and data operations. And there's a lot of power that comes with this device because it's basically essentially an intelligent probe. From a deployment perspective, we are introducing what we call zero-touch provisioning and auto detection, which allows you to, as we mentioned, pre-provision a template within EdgeView. So you can, if you know you're doing an implementation next Monday and you have all the details on the site, this week you can provision the template, get the profile all set up and ready to go. When the technician goes out on site next Monday, they merely have to plug in the device. The device will identify itself to our zero-touch provisioning server and then deploy its own parameter. Today that's actually something that will be available in January. Today, that site will merely just download its own profile and template But in either case, it simplifies the implementation process. And from an operational perspective, it allows you to be more efficient with your field force, or if you're using third-party technicians, it allows you to have them on and off site more quickly. From a service provisioning perspective, this becomes our gateway to access services at the customer site. So for example, if the customer site is designed to be a voice and data service, and you would like to control the amount of bandwidth that is offered for the voice side or the data side, you can actually create for lack of a better term, a spigot to increase the bandwidth for the voice. You can automate the process, or you can do it manually, where you're always protecting enough bandwidth to make sure that voice traffic is going to be delivered with a high quality. And again, that becomes an important part of what we do as a service and as a solution, is we prioritize the voice so that the call quality is, because it is real time, the call quality is always exceptional. And then the data traffic will be throttled down while the voice is taking the bandwidth. And that becomes an important part of our analytics, because as you can see in point number 3, status streaming, we're constantly delivering data back to the EdgeView, so you can monitor each of your customer sites to make sure they are receiving the quality that they expect, that you're living up to any SLAs that they've committed, and we're tracking that proactively. And as I mentioned with our event triggers, this is where we deliver that data, so that if a threshold is breached, if a level of quality is dropped, if the level of quality that you expect is dropped, then we can proactively alert your engineering team, and basically you can jump in and try to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. And then ultimately, the EdgeMarc itself gives you the ability to create an environment of interoperability, whereas you can provision your SIP trunks in a common format to the customer site. And then the EdgeMarc itself, can be provisioned to interface with an IP PBX, a PRI if need be, to a PBX, or simply Ethernet to standard IP phones. Those configurations can vary site by site, while you maintain consistency of your trunk configurations. And to give you some visibility as to what's actually running on an EdgeMarc, there's 7 key applications that are running on an EdgeMarc as a standard deployment. The first is that it is a WAN router. So we do have some customers who deploy it as their main router to the customer site. And this is important, because if you're going to be doing traffic shaping, as you see on the upper right-hand corner, we need to have access to the voice and the data, because we need to be able to throttle the data back to make room for the voice components. We're a SIP firewall. That's incredibly important in the fact that most data firewalls are not strong at handling voice. So if you are currently deploying data firewalls and you want to offload the voice component to that, the EdgeMarc can handle all the voice firewalling requirements, but still hand the data off in what we call a proxy ARP configuration. We can hand the data back to your data firewall, so that all of your rules and protections that you've put in place within a data firewall are maintained. And that's obviously especially important in environments where you have regulatory requirements on data. In addition, we are a PSTN gateway, so the device can have traditional telco links into the device in case of you want to back up against broadband failure, and we have analog and PRI handoffs on the LAN side. Voice quality monitoring is a key application of ours, as we've talked about. That's kind of the main reason the device and the application was designed. Finally, we have NAT and DHCP capabilities, and we're a full SIP proxy. So that, and we can run in active or passive modes in that. But the key there is that we are very flexible in SIP environment or in IP environments in order to conform to the configuration you need. So to look at the devices that we deploy, the EdgeMarc capabilities that we deploy today, if you're a current EdgeMarc customer, or you've been exposed to some of the EdgeMarc deployments today, there's some other products that have been deployed which have been upgraded to these ones we've talked about. You'll see a lot of 4550 and 4700 devices, which are still supported and still heavily utilized. But most recently, we've introduced the EdgeMarc 2900 series, which is kind of an exciting change in the market because it's a full gig throughput. So as many of you probably know, broadband providers today are starting to go into multi-hundred megabit connections, if not full gigabit connections. And those connections are available to your customers, or you're providing them to your customers at a very reasonable cost. So they're very apt to look at higher speed connections. So the 2900 allows you to maintain traffic shaping and all the data controls that we've spoken about, while still providing up to full gigabit connections. That device also has the capability on the 2900A to offer FXO and FXS ports off of it. And from a capacity perspective, we can handle up to 300 concurrent calls, meaning 300 active phone calls going through the device, which based on your typical trunk to seat ratio is a seat size in excess of 1,000. But if you do have sites that are larger than that, we have the EdgeMarc 7301, which is also a full gigabit and does up to 2,000 concurrent calls. And another key point on the 2900 is the 2900 is both electrical and optical. So if you're a service provider today who's looking to get rid of copper outside plant and move to optical, or if you're an integrator or a VAR who does a lot of work with carriers who do offer optical handoffs, we can take an optical feed into the device. And then from a traditional trunking perspective, we also offer the 4806 and the 4808, which offer analog FXS and FXO, and in addition, T1 and PRI interfaces. And as you can see, the session counts on those goes up to 100 and 500 throughput calls. So basically, depending on the environment you're looking at, we can support an all Ethernet environment, an Ethernet with some traditional analog and POTS lines requirements, and then ultimately, if you have customers who aren't ready yet for full IP, but you'd like to move their service to SIP trunk and optical, you can go with a 4806 or 4808 and deliver PRI. So as we kind of summarize some of the operational benefits, as I mentioned, we simplify implementation and installation by pre-provisioning the device, minimizing any on-site configuration, and effectively enabling a plug-and-play environment so that your technicians don't have to go through a major training exercise. It's more about them just being able to get the equipment out on site and deploy the devices, but configuration will all be done prior to actual site visit. We'll give you an increased, or as we like to say, superior visibility in the fact that once that customer is deployed and you're operating their network, you'll be able to see when they have any kind of a quality problem on voice. Is it LAN-based? Is it WAN-based? If you are the service provider, you now have the data and analytics to solve that problem on your broadband connections and resolve those issues. If you're not, and you're doing an over-the-top environment, you're going to get an extensive amount of data to be able to hand over to whoever the broadband provider is, so that you can work with them to resolve your joint customers' issues. One of the most powerful things, and I think I've mentioned it already, is our ability to do remote packet captures. So if you're running an EdgeMarc on site and you're utilizing EdgeView through CLOUDCO, you have the ability to launch a packet capture from that site and capture all packets coming and going, for a specific amount of time in and out of that device, which is incredibly powerful because as we talk about this capability to customers and service providers around the country, we hear stories of providers having to do 15, 20 truck rolls. Every time they need a new packet capture, they have to do a new truck roll. If you're using CLOUDCO EdgeView and an EdgeMarc, that's simply the push of a button. The person in the NOC can access packet captures whatever they need to. In addition to the fact that we'll actively monitor. And the active monitoring basically allows you to set thresholds so that when there's certain thresholds are breached based on quality or other metrics that you want to manage or monitor as part of your network, that active monitoring will trigger an alert to the network operations center, in addition delivering predefined data, the data that you define, predefined data sets to your engineers so they can begin troubleshooting that problem, which we believe results in highly efficient trouble resolution. And I've got a slide coming up, but basically, you can take trouble resolution from days to minutes, which from a customer care perspective and from a cost perspective becomes very important. Ultimately, this all results in increased call quality. The fact that we're doing the traffic shaping and maintaining a high level of bandwidth for the voice traffic, the fact that we're actively monitoring devices so that when there are problems, you can identify them quickly and resolve them quickly. Because as we all know, anybody who's in the 24/7 service business, it's inevitable that there will be a problem somewhere. The more important question is for your customer, who has the right tools to resolve the problems quickly and ensure that they don't recur. And then finally, just from an operational perspective, another thing that's very powerful is when you deploy an EdgeMarc on site, let's say on December 1st, you deploy an EdgeMarc, you can do a full backup of that configuration and basically take a snapshot of what that configuration looks like. In 2 months, if you're having problems again and issues again with that site, you can compare the configuration as it exists during the problem issue and when it was actually deployed and determine, was the device configuration changed in any way? And if in fact it was, it'll highlight which parameters were changed and who actually accessed the device to make that change. Very powerful operations tool, because if you have a technician who goes in and makes a change that perhaps is not part of your best practices, or perhaps they made the change, it seemed to make sense at the time, but clearly it's causing a ripple effect of another issue, you'll be able to identify all those problems and all those changes that were made since the device was last working properly. And again, from an operational perspective, I think we all know that half the time problems happen is because somebody made a change and didn't document it or analyze, acknowledge it. So tracking down what that change was can be a needle in a haystack. We're going to bring that needle out of the haystack for you. So a lot of what we talk about is service provider based, but it's also a very common application to use the EdgeMarc if you're an integrator or an IT service company, because the EdgeMarc can be deployed agnostic of the carrier. And by that, I mean, it still becomes an asset in the sense that it's going to still do traffic shaping and management and interface with the call control from a SIP perspective, but it will look like the SIP device to the service provider in a hosted PBX or a SIP trunking environment, and then become an interface again to the LAN to make sure that quality and service is running properly. But more importantly, if you're a consultant managing 15 customer locations for a customer, you want to be able to have monitoring capabilities of those sites and to make sure that whatever SLAs have been offered to them by the service provider are being honored, to make sure the quality is running well, and it gives you that remote view to all those customer sites. And when you consider the fact that each of these devices costs less than a truck roll, and at any time when there's a problem, if you don't have this device, you could roll it 2 or 3 times. It becomes very important to have that demarcation point at a customer site. So whether you're a service provider, whether you're an over-the-top service provider, or whether you're an IT or an integration company, the device itself is going to give you incredible visibility, control, and resolution capabilities at that customer site. As we talked about from an implementation process, I just wanted to reinforce that idea of the pre-configuration or using templates to minimize any kind of variation in your network, the device selection. If you have experience with EdgeMarcs, in the past you would have had to acquire an EdgeMarc by a specific call count license and buy a specific device from the perspective of capacity, bandwidth, and other things. With the partnership that we have with CLOUDCO, you now have the ability to buy a 2900 or 2900A or a 4806, which is fully licensed, meaning the 2900 will have the capability of 300 concurrent calls out of the box. The 4806 will have the capacity of 100 calls out of the box. So the decision from a device perspective that you need to make is only, do I need IP, do I need analog, or do I need PRI, or do I need all of them? So it makes it a much simpler pre-configuration perspective, because you won't have to assess what is the throughput you're going to need from a call control perspective. And from an implementation perspective, then it's merely a case of, if you've created the template for that specific device, you deploy the device at the customer site, you push the template down to the customer site, and the device is ready to go. So we've greatly simplified it, and the power of that comes from EdgeView. And not to get ahead of the presentation, but one of the beauties of our partnership with CLOUDCO is that in the past, you would have had to buy EdgeView, host EdgeView yourself, and make all the capital cost upfront investment to get EdgeView up and running. With CLOUDCO, since they're going to be hosting it, managing it for you, they've eliminated the entire upfront capital cost of EdgeView. So now if you're a provider that needs 5 EdgeMarcs, EdgeView is very affordable. If you're a provider that needs 200 EdgeMarcs, you don't have to bother to allocate the capital cost up front, because it will be available to you through CLOUDCO in a very reasonable monthly cost. From a trouble resolution process, I just want to focus on a couple of things. As I mentioned, our goal is to take that trouble resolution time frame from days to hours. So let's look at a typical case. There's a service problem. The customer reports the trouble. The service provider sends the technician to site, does local data gathering, tries to understand what the issue is, and then they review the data. If in fact they can assess the problem there, they solve the problem. If not, they have to review the data, then perhaps they need to send the technician back on site to resolve the problem, whether it be to reprogram something, reconfigure something, whatever the case. They're back out on site, so maybe you spent the time and effort into 2 truck rolls, and that may be over a couple of days. You attempt the resolution, repeat the process if necessary, and then ultimately resolve the issue. If you're living in a world where you're using CLOUDCO EdgeView, now EdgeView can report the problem to you, because EdgeView will see the thresholds that you've set breached. They'll see the MOS score drop, or they will see whether it be jitter or any other analytic that you want to look at. You'll be able to look at that and see, that'll tell you, hey, we're seeing a problem here. That will automate the data gathering using our event triggers capability, which means that not only will your technician get alerted that, yes, there was a problem at Smith Warehouse, and here's the packet capture, the MAND log, and the sys log associated with when that trouble hit. So you can look at the analytics and look at the data right away as to what happened when that problem occurred. Review the analytics, remote access to the site based on what you determine that problem is, based on the diagnosis, and potentially resolve that problem from the network operations center. The key is this time frame could have taken minutes, hours, depending on the back and forth. But in this case, all the data is accessible at your fingertips in your network operations center. So the idea of having somebody available, getting a truck out there, travel time, all that goes away. You can do a tremendous amount of analytics and troubleshooting before you even have sometimes before the customer even is really heavily aware of the problem. And then finally, in addition to the operations perspective, we talked about a little bit before about turning on new services. Because there's this device on site, you have this EdgeMarc on site, which is in the path of voice and data. It gives you the ability to control multiple applications at the customer site. So from a business continuity perspective, all the EdgeMarcs we're talking about have dual WAN connections, which means that if you're a service provider, you have the ability to offer them a second WAN connection from a continuity perspective. If you're an over-the-top provider or an integrator, you may offer them the option of getting diverse access from multiple carriers in order to maintain their business continuity. And in addition, we have the capability on an EdgeMarc to do what's called local survivability, which is an option that you can acquire through CLOUDCO as well. Local survivability means that if you lose all WAN connectivity, you can default back to a POTS line or a traditional telephony connection if in fact one is set up. Or if you don't opt for that option, but you want to make sure that you may, if you're doing a hosted PBX environment, you can maintain desk-to-desk dialing so that if for whatever reason you lose both WAN connections or a single WAN connection, if that's all it's out the customer, sales can call accounting in the office still, so they don't lose all telephony. Again, especially if you're looking to replace traditional PBX environments with hosted PBX environments, you want to be able to give them all the comfort they felt that they had with a traditional PBX environment that somebody might tell them they won't get with hosted. In this case, a hosted PBX environment can maintain local dialing. Something we're very excited about is in Q1, we're going to be offering our SD-WAN capabilities. And SD-WAN is a very hotly talked about subject. There's a lot of very interesting stuff you can do with SD-WAN. Our focus is basically to focus on better utilization of the WAN connections at the customer site and focus on application priority. So if you have dual WAN connections and you have degradation on one connection, we'll be able to move your voice traffic and let's say your Salesforce.com traffic to the higher level connection so that you can determine, or your end user can determine, what are the most important applications going over those broadband connections and how do you maximize the quality of those. So it won't just be voice coming over an EdgeMarc anymore. You'll be able to maximize quality over whatever applications are most critical to your business. And this will introduce our ability to deliver a higher level of analytics and things like, for example, being able to do remote speed tests. So your end user has a 100 meg connection from Verizon Fios. You'll be able to do daily or weekly tests on that connection to prove to them whether or not they're getting that connection speed. So it's a value add to your customer. This will be something that there'll be an additional monthly cost to this, but based on the industry pricing, it will be extremely reasonable. But I think it's going to be very powerful, being able to deliver SD-WAN capabilities to a smaller site that isn't looking to do the traditional MPLS replacement that SD-WAN companies focus on. And then finally, from an analog services perspective, POTS isn't dead. AT&T and Verizon have changed the POTS pricing to $70 to $80 a month. Their goal is to dissuade people from using POTS, but we all know traditional telephony services don't die easy. So there's lots of customers who have doorbells, door buzzers, alarm systems. They still need POTS lines. So if in fact you are a service provider or even, again, an integrator, you can deploy POTS lines from a SIP trunk out of a 2900A or 4806. And the premium, the cost for this is merely an equipment premium, which is minimal, especially with the very attractive pricing you get through 888. The ROI is 1 to 2 months. So you'll be able to generate revenue from that site or provide resiliency to that site with analog services. And I think that's a very powerful story to tell a customer when you're trying to solve the issue of communications is solving a business problem, and that's really the goal. So ultimately, we see the benefits of network edge orchestration, under our cloud-to-edge environment. It's reduced customer churn. So if you're a service provider, an integrator, a VAR, and your goal is customer satisfaction, maintaining that business communication so they don't even know the services are there, they just work. Because of all the things we've talked about, trouble resolution, and the service quality protections you get out of network edge orchestration, it goes a long way to minimize churn in the first 30 days because implementations are simple. You don't have customers trying to do an install and out of frustration they cancel the service because things didn't go to the level they wanted it to go. By the same token, their services are going to be running strongly for 1, 2, 3 years into the contract. So residual or renewals become very easy because everything you've promised you're going to be able to deliver. Significant cost reductions from an operations perspective. This is very powerful. The fact is, as we've talked about, troubleshooting, implementation costs, all these things can be very manpower intensive and cost intensive. Much of that goes away in our environment. So if you can eliminate 2-3 truck rolls per year per customer, that's $900 to in excess of $1,000 a year in operational cost. And then finally, the new revenue benefits. It's very easy to build an ROI especially with the cloud to edge model under CLOUDCO, to justify the operational value of network edge orchestration. But when you add on top of the fact that you can also turn on new revenue opportunities, it's a very clear business decision that this makes sense. It's going to save you money, and it's going to increase your top and your bottom line. And ultimately, from our perspective, from the sales process of your sales teams being able to tell customers about the quality and the level of support and service they're going to receive, through the implementation and ongoing support process, through contract renewal, there's an impact and effect at each and every one of those processes within your customer cycle that you're going to realize, and that will realize cost savings, increase customer sat, and increase profitability. And then finally, from my perspective, just to cover, we've talked about Cloud to Edge Complete, which is really the business model that we've wrapped this all together in. So today, in the past, EdgeMarc and EdgeView's appliances and services were very much a capital intensive. You buy the device, you buy the licenses of the device, you host EdgeView yourself, you have to buy the EdgeView licenses. All of it is an upfront capital investment. With our partnership with CLOUDCO, there's a highly reduced cost on the EdgeMarc, and then CLOUDCO is going to provide everything else, including support on the EdgeMarc, support on your EdgeView, access to the EdgeView, the servers. Everything gets wrapped up into a monthly subscription cost per site. So this becomes, from a cash flow perspective, since the services you tend to sell are going to be monthly billed, it makes sense for you to pay for the services that you're going to use on a monthly environment as well. So at that, I'll turn it over to Josh, who can cover some of the things that are specific and key from a CLOUDCO perspective.
Thanks, Jim. So one of the most important things that I find the EdgeMarcs bring to the table is the survivability. With the survivability license, downtime and HA can really be utilized for your customer to make sure that they always have phone service, whether you're going through the A series with FXO lines or you're using a 4800 series with PRI lines, depending on how many channels your customers require. The survivability option gives you the ability to keep your phones registered at the local site. If connections were to fail, like Jim mentioned earlier, and using the B2B UA or the ALG functionality to route those calls out through a PRI or FXO line to keep calls being able to go in and out, even if you have a SIP trunk provider that has a DR, disaster recovery failover IP, to allow calls just to kind of flood in to keep your customer site up and working in case of an outage. The 300 simultaneous call license being installed in the box is huge. It used to be that you had to purchase your simultaneous call licenses individually on the box, guessing how much your customer needed. Even if the customer underestimated and business got more busy, you had to upgrade those licenses. With these boxes, you get a pretty large simultaneous call threshold. 300 calls is quite a bit. I don't know very many people who are utilizing that many. There are a select few big call centers who are, but 300 calls is a lot to be able to utilize to the service when you look at the price of the device compared to purchasing those licenses separately in the old traditional format. Network and call quality data on all calls. So the EdgeMarc itself monitors traffic and quality of the phone calls via MOS score, latency, jitter, and it reports that back to the EdgeView service or Cloud to Edge service and gives you the ability to search those calls. So if a customer calls in a couple of days later, which happens quite a bit, and complains about a call from 3 days ago, well, it's kind of hard to give them an answer on that, and they expect an answer. With the Cloud to Edge platform, you could simply log into your portal, go to that device, and search for that call. You can see the MOS score and say, hey, it does look like you had some issues with the internet on X side. We will look into this further. We do see that there's an issue. At least being able to give your customer some sort of answer other than, I don't know, I'll have to look into it. You can kind of have some answers at the tip of your fingers. The live view of EdgeMarc device statuses, I like that option. If you go into like your status table for your sites or for your tenant that contains all your sites or groups. You can see all of your edge marks, their IP addresses, any type of SIP server that's programmed to them, the max of them, the state, whether the device is up or down, secondary state, whether you're running continuous captures. I'm looking at one of my lab units, which is running packet captures 24/7 and keeping them for a 10-day retention period. Connection times, last contacted, SIP analytics. One of the cool things about the EdgeView service or CloudEdge service is you can also view these captures right in the console. It pretty much has a Wireshark installed right into it. So you can look at that capture, whether you want to look at the WAN facing side or LAN facing side, and view that capture and look at the SIP traffic back and forth. So you don't have to involve any other additional tools. You can just do all that diagnostics right from the actual console itself. And central device management. This is a very important feature to me. If you need to make a change, whether an ISP fails and you need to do a failover, or an HA environment, HA failover has occurred, you need to change the SIP server on all your devices, whether you have a big soft switch hosting all your customers, you can easily push that change out to all your devices at once. You don't have to call your customers and request for remote login to their networks and make changes to these devices. You don't have to send somebody out to make these changes. You can push parameters or entire configs, single parameters or entire configs out to these devices and really manage them from a backstance point where you're not involving your customer, you're not pestering them. They may not even know that their service is dropped by the time you've pushed that out to your devices and service is already back up and running. Jim, do you have anything else to add on this slide?
Nope, not. It's good.
All right.
Jump to the next one.
Yeah, please. So one of the things I've talked about is the 10-day retention period on 24/7 running PCAPs. I have that running on my lab servers. There are a couple of customers with us who do that. They love it. End users never report issues on time. They always report them late and expect to have an answer right away. So that is a pretty key feature for me, especially if you're calling our lines for support. If you want something fixed and fixed quickly, packet captures are important. We're able to see a lot more information, a lot more data, and being able to see the invites and the signaling go back and forth. Packet captures are a very important piece of troubleshooting any type of call quality or call issues at all. Quick touchless deployment. So CLOUDCO works with 888 VoIP distribution upon purchasing the devices. One of the things that we offer is we create a base template on these devices, so when you plug them in or send them to your customer site to plug them in, they automatically talk back to the server. So it's almost like a ZTP, except we are manually making these changes to the devices, so that way it's easier for you to deploy these, at which point you may have a base template sitting on your EdgeView tenant, and once it reaches out to the server, it pulls down that tenant, that base template, automatically configures the device to work with your soft switch. This is very nice, not having to send somebody out to the install, being able to tell your customer, if it's something that you can trust them with, to just plug the device in, and it'll work. Low MOS score email alerts, anytime MOS scores, like Jim mentioned earlier, drop below a predefined threshold, it will send out an email alert about your customer's network quality or MOS quality for their calls are dropping below this threshold, and they may be experiencing some sort of issue. So you get a little bit of a proactive feel to look at customer issues before they call you. It's always a nice thing when a customer calls you and you can tell them, yeah, we're aware of this, we're looking into it now. Device backups. Device backups are important. If you make a change that needs to be reverted, you can easily revert this change. If a device fails and you need to replace it, which I have not seen yet, but in the event that that does happen, where there's a power surge or anything happens, it's easy to replace the devices between the quick touchless deployment, or let's say that this device at your customer site has a ton of custom settings. Well, once it's plugged in, you can push the old device back up to this device and get this customer up and running a lot quicker without having to send somebody in to remember all these changes you've made and customize for that particular customer. The global report page, I like this feature. I think it's cool. If you go to your reporting in your EdgeView and you go to your dashboard, you can see a lot of statistics about all your sites, such as worst MOS score, or minimum pulled MOS score, EdgeMarcs with the most current calls, worst pulled average MOS score, the worst 5 calls with a MOS score, and it breaks them down by site, which is nice. So you can almost put this up on a screen in your office and be able to quickly see that there's an issue with a customer site beyond the customer calling or even the email. You can have some type of monitor screen to view these statistics and get a real life feel of what your customers are experiencing. Ready for the next page unless you have anything to add, Jim?
No, in fact, and that's a great point that you mentioned about it gives you great visibility. And whenever you're managing, especially the larger networks get, it's about managing exceptions, right? Managing when things are working, you don't want that in front of you. You just want to know what's not working. So EdgeView is very good at helping you determine that to maintain a high level of network performance.
So why CLOUDCO partner? I think we can go to the next one here, Jim. So using CLOUDCO partner, Jim mentioned this earlier, there's no upfront cost for you to put a server and a Cloud2Edge server, EdgeView licensing server in. The upfront cost is pretty large. Software, you have to purchase the software, professional services, you have to have the server or the ability to have a hosted environment to run a server of this size. CLOUDCO takes upon that cost and offers you the service at a very cheap monthly price, so you don't have to ever occur that upfront costs. Maybe you don't have enough customers to ever get ROI on this. It is rather large. I'm not sure on the full pricing details. Jim may be able to share it, but CLOUDCO offers this service out to you and your EdgeMarcs out there to connect to the service and gain all these features without having to spend a ton of money to receive. The monthly cost is very minimal. It can be rolled into your customer's monthly bill, probably without them even realizing it. CLOUDCO will do direct billing to the reseller, so you don't have to work with any other third party. You just work with CLOUDCO itself. CLOUDCO works with you on all your billing needs. You have access to CLOUDCO support engineers, such as me and my team. If you have any issues, we take phone calls for any support issues you're having, or if you just need some help looking at a capture, a customer called you, you have your captures running on your EdgeMarc, we can easily log into the EdgeView service as an admin and pull out that capture and review it for you and review it with you and kind of lead you down the right direction of what's going on, or even have a resolution for you. So we have a lot of information at our fingertips as well to help you service your customers. CLOUDCO also works with the 888 VoIP distribution for the provisioning device, like we mentioned before. This gives you the ability to not have to log into this device and set a community and change the root passwords. We're going to make it so this device plugs in, automatically talks back to the EdgeView service, and pulls down your template. This saves you a lot of time because you don't have to ship this device to your office first. You can just ship it directly to your end user and have them plug it in. It talks back to the server automatically, draws down its config, and you're ready to go. Anything to add on that, Jim? Nope. So 888 VoIP, talk about 888 VoIP here, is a value-added distributor for VoIP hardware and software solutions. We sell a lot of products, all of which you are likely using out in the field. So any type of support issues you're having in any devices behind your EdgeView service or EdgeMarc itself, we're most likely familiar with and can help you out pretty well. So utilizing our support team is definitely going to be a good value add for you. We work closely with 888 VoIP. CLOUDCO Partner is an affiliate of 888 VoIP, which is a distributor of cloud services and software with a focus on individualized and personalized support. So innovative solutions such as cloud-controlled IaaS, 3CX private cloud, SIP trunking, and routers. We offer all those services, and we support all those services. The partner comes first. It's a channel-driven business, and it's a hassle-free automated billing and innovative CLOUDCO hub portal for one-stop customer management. So you can actually have a portal log in for your billing that has your colors and your themes. It's a pretty nice setup to familiarize yourself with our company and be able to pay your bill quickly and easily.
right, well, thanks, Josh. Now, Jim, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So everyone, for attending our webinar, you will receive a $20 credit on your first Cloud2Edge bill through CLOUDCO partner, and that is going to end up being 1 month free. You can contact us in regards to that. And on the next slide, we also have another promotion that 888 VoIP is doing with Edgewater, and it's a YEALINK Edgewater bundle promotion. If you haven't tried out YEALINK yet, you can go ahead and purchase an EdgeMarc 2900E through us and sign up for Cloud2Edge, and you'll also get access to really great demo pricing on YEALINK's T4S IP phones, as well as their W56P decked phone. And again, just like the attendee incentive on the last slide, for more information, just contact 888 VoIP at 888-864-7786, or you're welcome to give us an email as well at sales@888voip.com. Now, if we can just go to the next slide. Perfect. That actually is, I don't know why this last slide's not showing up, but that actually is going to conclude our webinar. We were going to have a Q&A session, but unfortunately, we ran out of time. There was a lot of great information that we discussed today. We had some wonderful questions asked. So we are going to go through all of those questions, and tomorrow, in addition to sending you this on-demand webinar, we will send you a write-up answering all of these questions so you can go through that as well. Like I said, please reach out to CLOUDCO partner and 888 VoIP. We'd love to set up a call to further discuss Cloud2Edge and Edgewater other solutions with you as well. So everyone, thank you so much for attending today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. That's going to conclude our webinar. Hope you all have a nice day.